There's more trouble in Syria. 20 people were killed in Syria over the weekend by government forces, and it happened in Damascus, which is usually relatively calm, so this may mean that protests are growing again despite the military siege in several cities there. Over in Jordan, officials say that they're getting ready for a mass exodus of Syrians fleeing their country, and in Egypt, they're putting pressure on President Assad by recalling their ambassador to Damascus. As things heat up, is it time for intervention in Syria of a military nature? Well, there was an interesting post in the Huffington Post over the weekend. It came from Daniel Wagner, CEO of Country Risk Solutions and author of the just-published book called Managing Country Risk. He's with us now on the Daily Wrap. Mr. Wagner, you have written that now is not the time for intervention in Syria, but is there a feeling that you might have that we're moving in that direction?
Well, the tide certainly seems to be moving in that direction, and I'm a big fan of something that I call common sense foreign policy. It seems to be in short supply these days. Common sense foreign policy would tell me that it's not a good idea to consider military intervention at this time for a few reasons. One is we don't really know who we would even be supporting. Two is they don't even have any territory to support. And three is that I think it's really just more of a roll of the dice than anything else in an effort to feel better about the unfolding humanitarian disaster that is occurring in Syria. But sometimes it's better to wait and see what happens rather than rush in and act simply to feel better.
So you think that what was done in Libya, for instance, cannot really be replicated here?
It would be difficult to do. One of the problems is that the Syrian armed forces are significantly larger. There's no point in trying to impose a no-fly zone because the Syrian Air Force isn't even flying. And ultimately, there would be a higher risk of civilian casualties because it's unclear exactly where the rebel forces are massed and exactly who some sort of a military intervention would be supporting at this point.
One of the things you wrote about was that if the outside world were to start funneling arms to the Free Syria Army, that they could end up in the hands of Al-Qaeda, which would just be terrible. There's no guarantee that that would not happen, that these weapons that we might give could end up in the hands of the terrorists. So what does that tell us? Does that tell us we just have to stay out?
Well, I think we learned an important lesson in Libya, and that was that it was unclear who it was that we were actually funding money and support to. That is even less clear in this case. It turns out that in Libya, there were some former al-Qaeda elements that ended up receiving some of this, and they're actually in the driver's seat now in Tripoli, oddly enough. The question is whether the governments that supported this action, the Western governments, knew this or not. Whether they knew it or not, I think they were unified in the idea of anybody but Gaddafi. We have to ask ourselves a very important question now, however. And the question now is, what would happen in the absence of Assad? Do we know? If we look at what has happened since the fall of the various leaders in Libya and Tunisia and Egypt, we've seen that radical or pro-Islamic governments have taken hold in each of those countries. Is that something that we really want on Europe's doorstep? Is that something that Israel really wants at this particular time when it's staring Iran in the face? With so much uncertainty, sometimes it's better that we embrace the devil that we already know.
Daniel Wagner, CEO of Country Risk Solutions, and your book is just out. It's called Managing Country Risk. Thank you for being with us on the Daily Wrap.
Thank you much, Michael.